diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we don't use those words a lot because, I mean, again, they have like 15 definitions per coast you live on. But we really fundamentally believe that having a personal awareness and an institutional or organizational awareness of how they can do a better job of embedding a variety of ideals and ideas in the way they make decisions about making money, I think is a smart thing to do. Like, we just think that's, and then the social, and then the opportunity to show empathy, right, as a company, both to your employees, but then to the community in which you operate. We also think that just makes sense. So the 2 and 2 is why we exist, right?
Yeah, and that awareness thing is important because people have asked me, what's the most dangerous type of leader, and it's an unaware leader.
Oh man, that's powerful.
And on today's episode of The Claw, I'm joined by my good friend Quinetha Frasier, also known as Q, with SEQ. We're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to both your business and finding talent, and how you should include that in your marketing. So join in and listen as I chat with Q. And welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Leicher Partners. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I am joined today by Quinetha Frasier. She is with SEQ and a longtime friend of mine. So yes. I don't call her Quinetha, I call her Q. So Q with SEQ. And so tell everybody what SEQ is, because you wouldn't let me say it.
Well, it's the Southern Equity Collective, and rightly so. It's not SEQ. It's technically SEC, but for obvious reasons, the Southern Equity Collective, as an acronym, is SEQ. We had this conversation before we came on about, the likelihood of being sued and things like that.
Right. So tell me, what does the organization do?
Yeah, we are a multiracial equity. A lot of people are using the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy firm. And there are 4 of us who have come together from a myriad of careers, all tied to helping corporations and organizations to build strategies. I come from, obviously, a philanthropic background, and when we had the opportunity to talk about how we can enable companies to take this sometimes long-standing work around diversity and translate it into a case that's good for their business, as well as right now good for their social and community conscience, I knew it was a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Some of my founding partners come from academia. One comes from a very strong communications background. So it's been our company, being a Southern-born company, ironically now represent companies across the globe, and we now identify with the global South.
Oh, nice. That's what we'll say, because we tell people we're a Southern brand too, but we have people all over the place, and it's just, well, if you like relationship, if you like, you want to sit around, drink some iced tea, and talk about things, then we're your kind of company.
Yeah, you want to talk about grit.
The global South.
The global South.
Nice. That's going to be our new focus, the global South.
Yes.
So let's break it down, because I think and have seen, you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
So those are 3 words that are kind of being thrown together in this like DEI,
That's a good point.
DI, da 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 da. Tell me.
Yeah.
What is each one of them? What do they mean?
And I'll do it. I'll make it a little simpler than that. And we add to the spectrum justice, right? And I will begin with justice. We believe that in order for diversity, equity, and inclusiveness to live, there must also be justice. And we call this our equity framework, and it defines diversity, right, around representation, right? What the variety of voices and experiences that are represented within an organization or within a system or within a decision-making, right, opportunity. And then you look at equity, right? Equity not being equal,
right,
but equity meaning that there is a leveling, right? And that there is a leveling more so of power, right? So that there's an open opportunity for everyone to participate within a process, a decision, right? Or a system or organization. And when we look at inclusiveness, it really think about the temperature or the environment or the likelihood of having belongingness or feeling a sense of belongingness within a place, being more than whether you can get in the door, but rather you get there, rather the lights are too bright, your eyes, you can't stay,
right.
but rather you feel as though this is a place where you can live out your own experience. So, and that's why justice, being the fourth part of our equity framework, includes the reallocation of resources. Because sometimes in order to create this like environment and to also bring these voices to the table, there has to be a reallocation of resources so that some of the individuals who may not have been there before can have this experience. And so we have been very blessed to work with companies, some Fortune 500, some down to local philanthropic organizations who all say, hey, we knew and we innately had begun thinking about how we can bring more voices to the table because it makes more business sense to make business decisions based on a broad spectrum or dimension from not only our customers, but our teams, right? They help to inform that. And what we've learned through that process is even for companies that had already begun that work, having a way in which to first become informed about what the staff or the team's feelings are about these things. It has been very helpful in the way that they make decisions across the organization. And then secondly, we've learned that even if they've done this work, having a way of having a shared set of values and definitions, because so much has happened in the last 2 years, right? And many of our, especially Fortune 500 companies, they're getting, through their divisions, some that are internally held and some that are externally held, are being bombarded, right? With like, we want diversity, but we mean this, or for us, we need to pay attention to racial equity because of this. And the question becomes like, what do we mean by diversity? What do we mean by at our company? Like what specifically because everyone may not have a diversity equity policy, right? So, the two things we've seen most valuable, and I've personally as a practitioner have found valuable, is having a company say, hey, let's first sit down across our organization and define what diversity even means for us, for on our board, our governance. And in the case of the way we relate to customers has everything to do with how our marketing team is able to communicate with them, how we, again, respond to issues around these things. So that's been I would say the joy of the last year. Y'all know, the temperature in the country is the world is so different. It's been taking up.
Yeah, what's been interesting for me as we went through the experience, because I've definitely always lived in this kind of entrepreneurial world, right?
Yes.
And there are and it's an interesting conversation. I saw somebody list this on LinkedIn the other day about, as a business owner, and I don't know that I 100% agree with this person, and I don't know that I 100% disagree with them. I'm still on the fence, right? Because it's something I noticed last year as we went through the pandemic and some of the, the social issues and things like that, is that business owners have been placed in this really weird place that I don't know that they signed up for.
They
right?
did not. They weren't prepared.
So religious leaders, politicians, some of those are the people that you think would fill those voids, and they don't. They just literally don't. And so last year specifically, as we went through some of that, business owners were the ones people were looking to for guidance. And it's like, I don't know that
think about that.
I thought I was going to make some money.
That's pretty powerful.
That's
what you're saying.
Looking for, right?
It's powerful what you're saying.
Yeah, and so that is a interesting. Because the person who put this up on LinkedIn was saying, if you're a business owner, then you have signed up to be a leader in this category. And I'm like, well, I don't agree with you, but I don't disagree with you.
Right. And, I reflect on yesterday, I listened to a talk from a man named Paul Shoemaker, who is the president of the SVP. It's a social venture capital fund for good, So anyway, and he reflected on that. He just released a book, which I'm not going to remember the name of, but he said that it's interesting in the more than 84 interviews he had with companies, pre and post pandemic, that companies now, before it was sort of a like a CSR motive, you need to address these things. But now he said, because of the changing dynamic of employees, the generation that are entering the workplace that we're depending on, they're demanding that we embed, that there is a cross sector that companies are able to communicate not only to other companies, but able to communicate to public entities like the government, like Facebook. What are you going to say, right? And then also you have to be able to interface also with other companies. But more importantly, they're asking you to communicate to the community.
Right.
And who said that these very corporate entities are trained to
do that, right? Yeah.
But I will say this, and this is not because you're one of my most famous human beings and my dear friend, but I'm relieved that firms like the Liger Partners exist, because it really gives companies, some of the technology firms we work with, it gives them a voice and a way to communicate a value that before may have been okay with being internalized, right? And maybe reflect in the way they do business, to now really creating a brand that attracts other companies, their colleagues, their peers to this mission. I like cause marketing and mission-based, and I know y'all don't call yourselves that, but when I learned that you all, as a part of the Atlanta Pledge, were challenging other marketing firms to embed the principles, the values that the community, that's a big deal, because think of the influence.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a new world. And I think you're right. We're not going to be able to avoid, companies will not be able to, C-suite executives will not be able to and this is why we do a lot of leadership coaching. They will not be able to put this in the parking lot for, third quarter 2026.
Well, and even just addressing it from the perspective of it being a thing to address, because it was religion, business,
right? No profit motive,
government, right. And then there feels like there's this void that then is filled in the business, and the business becomes more, it's filling the role that hasn't been typically
traditionally
filled.
Has been filled. They wouldn't even be in that business. They really would. I mean, the fact that now we know which companies support which things, or which companies care about what things. In the past, no one ever knew those things. I mean, like Ocean Spray, they make cranberry juice, I don't know what they feel about, women's rights. I mean, So it's really interesting.
Yeah. So you used a lot of big words when we talked about the diversity and equity and inclusion. Yeah. Give me a tangible, concrete example. Within a company of addressing diversity, addressing equity, addressing inclusion, like just a 1 minute little case study of how do you do that?
This is great. So there is a small meaning 55 employee technology company. And let me take a step back. They're not a technology company. They're actually a private equity firm that raises capital for technology companies. Okay. And they specifically, when they thought about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was from the perspective of their current HR director is a white woman who, was moved last year by the George Floyd massacre, and began asking her C-suite, hey, do we care? Because we know that the technology industry in and of itself, right, is very much, it's not very diverse. And so she said, she brought it back in house, hey, is there something we can do about this? Should we be also concerned? And there wasn't a way for them to quickly respond. Where are you going to five, 6 more people of color? It wasn't. But their response was, what are some other ways in which we can communicate to our technology, our workforce pipeline, right, that we are open and we welcome people who have diverse backgrounds? What can we do to initiate that? That's the piece we could do. And so we were able to help them first to take an assessment of what they have in place. So it's okay, what do we say about the way in which we hire people? What do we say about what we offer when people come here? Very simple things. And so the assessment of where they currently are, or specifically, how do we compensate people? And where do we spend money in marketing to specific places, like historically Black colleges, if we want to attract more African American engineers? So we were able to help them to first figure out where they are, current state, right? Like, okay, we want to do something, so what do we need? We don't know what we don't know. We hear that a lot. And the second part of this simple use case is, okay, now that we know what we don't know, how do we all come to like a place of operationalizing or activating this? So there's a period in the middle where there's education. So, workshops. Sometimes, in this case, the organization was small enough that we could facilitate small group between their affinities. Sometimes we do all white affinities. Sometimes it's all older generation. It just depends on what affinity might mean in a company. But it's to talk through sometimes how something as simple as bias shows up. And that's what we started. Like, I'm like, hey, are we even being biased in the way we bring people? When people get here, like, are we within our teams? Is sales more biased? So understanding something as simple as bias is where we began. And then we ended up landing with building out an actual set of protocols within their talent acquisition process, a set of processes and the way that for their board, right? How do they attract new people to the organization? So I hope that that in practicum is a simple way for a company to say, we can do what we can do, right? And more importantly, we can, and this is why communication strategy is a big part of what we do, we can have someone come in and help us to affirm our words. What are we going to say? And then help us to define the way that we make those words materialize internally, right? In our processes, the way we do business, and some of our larger clients, and I didn't talk because obviously those cases are much more robust, but they also add to that burden a way of evaluating that, internal structures, ways, policies, and spend more time really with a lot of education for employees, live trainings, and making that a part of the performance, the journey, the employee performance, development, professional development journey. They embed it within the organization. So, I would say, though, in summary, and this is a complete thought, that diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we don't use those words a lot because, again, they have like 15 definitions per coast you live on. But we really fundamentally believe that having a personal awareness and an institutional or organizational awareness of how they can do a better job of embedding a variety of ideals and ideas in the way they make decisions about making money, I think is a smart thing to do. Like, we just think that's, and then the social, and then the opportunity to show empathy, right, as a company, both to your employees, but then to the community in which you operate. We also think that just makes sense. So the 2 and 2 is why we exist, right?
Yeah, and that awareness thing is important because people have asked me, what's the most dangerous type of leader, and it's an unaware leader.
Oh man, that's powerful.
An unaware leader. So
I know that's in your book somewhere.
We're going to go to a commercial break. When we get back in a minute, I have a couple other questions on that. So
Great.
We're talking to Q from SEQ. You're listening to The Claw, which is a podcast for marketing suite executives. We'll be back in just a minute.
Thanks so much for watching the Claw podcast. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to your Liger Studios news break. The Thriller Fight Club is coming to Atlanta on April 17th. Jake the Problem Child Paul is going head-to-head with Ben Funky Askren at 9 p.m. at Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
However, this exciting fight pales in comparison to the massive showdown between Leo the Liger and Bjorn the Unicorn, coming to Atlanta May 29th. This fight is so big that Mike Tyson was forced to cancel his match with Evander Holyfield to make room.
Leo and Bjorn have had beef for a long time and are finally meeting face-to-face to see who has superior marketing abilities.
This will also be Leo the Liger's first time showing his face on camera, as usually he is represented by his team of marketing experts.
Big things are coming for Leo the Liger, but can he step up to the challenge? Find out on May 29th exclusively on Liger Studios TV.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw, a podcast for marketing C-suite executives. I am talking with Quinetha Frasier, also known as Q, from SEQ, because they're all cool and stuff. And they use a Q instead of a C.
We get to be the kind of management consulting firm that makes our own acronyms.
Yeah, well, all of them do.
That's what
you're charging for, right? Are the acronyms. We have a ROAR analysis. So, yeah, we made that up.
And it also costs $100,000.
Yeah, everybody's like, we want a ROAR analysis. I'm like, yes, you do. So we were talking before the break about diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Yes.
And so I have a very tangible question for you about hiring talent. Mm-hmm. And so if I am hiring talent and I intentionally want to find diverse talent for my space, and I'm going to say this, and we have a project manager on staff now, a black guy who's on staff, mm-hmm. and he's like one of the first I've ever gotten to interview even in that position. And it's not like wasn't
open to everyone.
We were open to everyone, right? And so is the problem that we aren't, because one of the things you said was marketing to HBCUs mm-hmm. and things like that, is it that we're not marketing to the right people? Mm-hmm. Or is it the talent pool needs to be, that we need
both
more people in the talent pool?
Both at the same time.
Because that's an equity problem.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. See, exactly. So the equity problem is the reason why we're on one side. And then obviously now.
But you have to fix equity earlier, right?
We got it right from the cradle, from the right. So the pipeline begins at schools. We know that in education. And I'm also very blessed to be working with a collaborative, a cradle to career collaborative from Charleston, where they're literally talking to companies about how they can ensure that the future employee represents the community where they exist. I mean, think about it. If you knew you were hiring employees from this community, and that would be great because the people that live there are probably people that would need to benefit. But I'll take a step back, on a more corporate, I would say on a more macro level. The opportunity for a company to identify diverse candidates relies on that organization's agents, the individuals, their saturation in a community of color or a community of wherever they're trying to reach. And this is important because, and I think so. I used to be embarrassed when I say relationship is the real currency. I say okay, really, because I mean, in practicum, right, in a private sector corporate entity, you don't think about it that way, but really the way that companies are able to translate their diversity goals into a more diverse, a more representative talent pool is because they're spending their resources in the pools where the people are. And in order to spend money in, let's say, an African-American community in Charleston, you would need to know where these people populate. What are the groups, or civic organizations, the social organizations, the corporate organizations, the National Association of Black Engineers, the National Association of Black Female Engineers. So because you're not going to hear it, they're not on TV, you open up Google and you type in Black engineers, they're not going to pop up immediately. So what that means is if an organization has at bare minimum the ability to get the feedback from the types of people that they want more representation of, and find a way to harness that feedback and use it as data, right, to inform where they spend their marketing dollars. I think that will yield more benefit, and we've seen it happen. So I'm not making this, but what was in my idea, but it takes that, and see, that's a patient approach. It takes more human effort to do that. It takes more planning effort. One of the things we do at SEQ is we initiate, if people are open, is creating some internal staff group. If it's 2 people or 7, there are people that can take the feedback from the organization and translate it into something that leadership can use to make a decision. And something like diversifying the talent pool. And when I was in Charleston working with the United Way, a company called Longevity, which used to be Meat Westvaco, which used to be something else. There's something, I mean, they're a huge like packaging and company. But I was very impressed by them. At the time, we had engaged 75 African-American professionals through the United Way around philanthropy, raising money for education. And we reached out to them, obviously, as partners. And they reached back out to us like, wait a minute, you have 75 African-American professionals together? Yes. Well, we're hiring for these very specialized positions that are not entry level. We really would love to have more diverse candidates because this is where we're having a big problem at finding. Like you said, we've interviewed 100 people and there was one black guy that showed up.
Exactly. Right.
So it's like so that triggered for us an opportunity within the black community to organize, right? This what I call, well, actually one of my mentors called this clearinghouse, right, of black talent. So then it becomes, okay, how do we communicate between each other? And this is a good example in conservation, which is very, very much non-diverse. So now we started an email trail. Every time a job hits the wire, boom, there's like 100 black professionals who work in conservation or around conservation that gets the email. Sounds very simple, but think about it. Like I would never know that some of these very random.
Yeah. So, but if it's non-diverse, but they're people who are in the field, then how's it non-diverse? Like, that's the gap that what I'm saying? Like, how do you bridge the gap between it?
The gap is someone's got to go to the pool. Like the diversity pool, there's an international pool. Like someone's got to go.
Yeah.
And when you find and sometimes you can hire a black person to go for you, or you can find a person within the organization who can create a relationship to go for you. But it really is, and I can speak, I'm a black American, so I can speak about the black American community.
Right.
It is relational.
Yeah.
And even within this specialized, I would say specialized professional sector spaces like technology, like environmental work, these are for black children that end up in these spaces is because they knew someone physically that was in that space.
Right.
So it's not like they saw it on TV or some at their college said they should. So that's why it's so important for the introduction. So if I'm a trustee on the South Carolina Nature Conservancy Board, and obviously we're always like, okay, where do we find more, at least black American people, because South Carolina's full of black people. And what we're doing now, which we learned, is you gotta go to the community, like to a meeting where there's something happening at the high school where these seniors are going to be, or you got to go volunteer when they have like these big community-wide college things. It's going to be like all the black school. You got to go because that's the only way these kids and their guidance counselors who are also from those communities are going to recall. So that's why the concept that we've been thinking about in Charleston, as I said, around really tightening the relationship between the corporate community, in our case, like a Volvo and a Boeing, well, Volvo in particular, who's in a very dense agriculture, rural community, Berkeley County in South Carolina.
Right.
So we need to tie them, right, to the local entities in that community as a way to start cultivating that future workforce, because the children are being born every day in the community, right? And the question is, what are they going to know about this company that's in their backyard that does these things that they would never ever be introduced to at their school? Well, that means we need to hook up with the teachers, right? There needs to be a relationship between the teachers and Volvo so that Volvo can tell the teachers, hey, so when y'all are developing the lesson plan next year, it's very important that they know about this thing. This school is full of black kids. I mean, whether it's resource or not, I mean, you want these kids to be able to go get a job here. So it's a patient approach, see, because we got to start that now for 10 years down the road. Yeah. But my call to action for all of your ecosystem is initiate the relationship. Right. Find somebody, hire a black person to go do it for you if it's talking about black Americans. But even within the organization, make the outreach. Find somebody who knows. A black person will tell you, especially like an engineer. They'll tell you where to go.
And I interviewed somebody a couple weeks ago, and I should remember this, but it's slipped out of my head because I've slept since then. And so she was talking about investment, and she talked about going to the HBCUs, that often the investors don't even know to go there, right? Like no one's taken them there to say, just like at Georgia Tech, there are things that are being built and being funded and whatever. But it's this like, Like someone's got to
like you said, build the bridge. No, you said it earlier. Like who's in the middle, and that's a perfect example because an investment in a HBCU where you have a readied audience of future workers who came, like in the case of Tuskegee, where I went to school. We have one of the largest engineering programs in the country. If you're looking for a black engineer, even if they're not an engineer, their mama or daddy is probably a black engineer or somebody in their family. See, that's how a black child ends up in college studying. And it's I keep saying relational. If you think about it from that perspective, then you know why you got to spend the money going to the HBCU instead of like just doing an ad campaign. Like, okay, we'll just
or just posting it on the
or
regular
just posting on
channels,
a regular
right?
Indeed. People say, oh, because even on my board, another board I'm on, they said, oh yeah, we posted the big C-suite position on Indeed and LinkedIn, and they listed all these. I thought, oh, that's great. I wonder if they did like some data segmentation, like targeted marketing, so that they could only find like black organizations on wherever these other places that you pay extra to like do the
right.
Because if you didn't,
so you're just saying that like Indeed and LinkedIn.
Oh not at all. Because it's just
but why is that?
Because these people, there's no. There's not. Let me not say no. There's very little activity around building networks of black professionals in these spaces other than the ones that already exist. Do you understand?
Right.
There's a Clubhouse. What if Clubhouse was Clubhouse for black professionals? Everybody would go, they market, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to put an ad up in Clubhouse. But who knows who the hell is in Clubhouse? I don't know we know, but really, like you're not saying I'm going to find black professionals there unless I pop into a room. There's no way, and I'm looking for this way I relate to data, like mining. If I were a data scientist, I would find a way to do that. Like if I'm going to pay Indeed, if I'm going to pay LinkedIn, I'm not picking on them. Or if I'm paying a local paper.
You're not picking on them because those are places that we post jobs.
Yeah, but they also don't do enough racially focused classifications with the people that are on their platform in a way that they use that to build definite connections based on race.
Right. So,
and maybe I shouldn't say that because that's not what they're supposed to be doing, but that's what the hell has to happen. It's the only way it works that they're going to be able to solve this problem.
That is the problem. Like, it's not about, I interview the candidates that come across my desk. That's what I do.
And they use very sophisticated, like, matching software so that you're getting the people that...
But what I was curious about, the other question I had on the other side of that is, so we post something on Indeed or LinkedIn, and then is it a bias that someone comes to our website and they look at the company and they say, yeah, that's not
that
mine.
Definitely impacts it. In fact, yesterday I got on a call and literally as soon as I opened the screen, I thought they couldn't find no black people in the whole wide world. There was about 85 people on a Zoom call and the whole panel. I was thinking, nobody? Yes, it does.
Well, there was a women's empowerment event. Remember our friend Kelly?
Yes. She went off.
She viral, right? She goes to a women's conference
and she's like,
and the panels are all men.
All men. She's like, it was a women's, there was we couldn't find one woman.
I won't mention who it is, but we did a thing earlier this week and it was for a women's event and they asked me to speak and I brought Whitney on and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
It happened, but think about that.
Yeah.
It's a women's conference.
Yeah, she came out of the break and she's like, so I'm at a women's conference.
She did. Oh, yeah. And it went viral because it was true.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it happens all the time.
That is crazy.
And so, yes, to answer your question, if I go to your website, if I'm just graduated from College of Charleston, I'm 20 years old, and I'm looking at these companies and I want to go work for this, awesome marketing company in Atlanta. And, I'm going to the website. First, I'm looking to see, because I'm not speaking for every black person in the world, but I know as an experience, you're looking to see who the rest of the team are. Mm-hmm. And you know how people say things like, you need to be a good fit, which is actually the worst thing in the whole wide world to ever say in an interview, because you don't want someone to be a good fit. Right. That means your culture is very limited and exclusive. But anyway, for a black employee who's thinking about coming off of Indeed and looking they are considering the makeup of the organization. And even in some industries, there's only no way around it. You're looking for some statement. Maybe there's something on the website that says, and we also care about the community and people of all kinds. That one little statement makes I have seen it make a difference, especially in conservation. Because I'm not gonna get into that, but some types of companies and some industries, it will benefit them to make a formal statement that they're at least open and inclusive, because some industries by nature are tied to specific, like conservation and land use. I mean, we can go all day, but
tied to certain.
Oh yeah,
I know what you're saying. Like frameworks,
constraints. Yeah. So it helps.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
Yeah, but I'm excited about the opportunity for companies to change the future.
Yeah.
Literally, which is why, if I also do one more call to action for C-suite executives, which I love saying because you keep saying it.
I say it wrong.
Is really, you looking for your community engagement, you please go to the local school. I mean, the school that's like literally less than 2 miles from your current headquarters or current where you go to work every day. I'm asking you, this is where you're going to donate $5 this month to the American Red Cross that has a headquarters in Minnesota or wherever, these other places. Just go to the school that's behind where you park every day and ask them, hey, can I help you come in? And if they say, we don't need your money, can you say, but what are y'all teaching those kids in the 8th grade about? I mean, it's very simple. I mean, a C-suite, you can say that.
Well, I think an important thing that you said was that, if you can't, and I've seen this so many times, if you can't see yourself in that, if you don't think it's for you, then you don't try.
Why would you try?
Right. If you don't have it reflected.
Yes.
So that's...
you can see it early. You can see people that work at a plant in our case, South Carolina, that works at a manufacturing plant. That's something I could do. I could be an engineer. Wow, I didn't know that. I could be a marketing executive. There are marketing executives at Boeing. I didn't know that, know. And so it's exposure. I mean, my story, if we had all day, I'd tell you, I'm from boogie down country, Charleston, but there were the images that made the difference. Yeah.
Very cool. And then even just even as people were thinking about their marketing, hey, run it by a few people.
Yeah. That's the best advice. That's the best advice. Just run it by somebody.
Yeah.
And
what do you think of this?
And again,
does this work for you?
And again, I'm only speaking from the perspective of one Black American woman. Okay. If you know one, call them. They'll tell you. If it has to do with a Black American person, just call the one person you know. Just say, let me run this by you real quick. They will tell you. This is important.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
It's wonderful.
And we'll put all the information on how to get to SEQ, which stands for Southeastern Collective.
The Southern Equity Collective.
Sorry, see, if I get it wrong, then you get to correct me, right?
This is why we have acronyms in the management consulting
Collective,
space.
SEQ. I've been talking with Quinetha Frasier, also known as Q, and you've been listening to The Claw. I am your host, Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger Partners. And until next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Claw Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And if you or someone you know wants to make an appearance on this show, email us at yourbestie@ligerpartners.com.